And they're very unassuming cameras, right? Low key.
Okay.
Yeah, but when that red light goes on, we know. We know.
It'll look great.
But yeah, like
So
Libby
neat.
says, keep it back so that all the pores don't show and all the facial hair and stuff.
Exactly.
It's natural, but it's all
Oh, we don't like natural
We don't
anymore.
like natural.
Natural in the 20s was great, but
right, nice. Oh. Wow. Are you ready? Oh, cool. Okay, so I would say, just starting with you, just say your name, where you're from, and your relationship to the family. Just so you have.
okay. I'm Libby Andrus, and great-granddaughter of Johnny Andrus the first, and daughter of Johnny Andrus the third. And I live in Wayzata, Minnesota, and I've been a part of the Surdna Foundation for about 25 years as a director.
I'm Sam Thorpe. I live in Edina, Minnesota, and I'm John Andrus #1 would have been my great-grandfather, and John E. Andrus III would have been a quasi-cousin. I think a first cousin once removed, something like that. And I've been on the board since 1984. So that's, I don't know how many years that is, but it's a long time. I was always very grateful. Thank you.
I'm Edie Davenport Thorpe. I am descended from John Andrus as also a fourth generation member, a great grandchild. My grandmother Edith was one of the original 8 or 9 children. I loused up the family tree in 1975 by meeting and marrying another Andrus cousin. So I am an Andrus by blood and an Andrus by marriage. I married Skid Thorpe. And I was on the board from 1991 till 2011 and enjoyed the 20 years on the board immensely.
And you can go ahead and actually look at me if it's easier, just to, yeah, and ignore you. This isn't happening. This is all
Okay.
just life. And I know that you had prepared some stuff that you wanted to talk about, so would you want to start just telling me a little bit about what you...
I was the most recent member. Maybe they should speak to the fact that they've been on the board longer. I mean, you were on in the 80s and Libby joined in the 80s.
Well, Sam was,
Yeah, I think.
what are your early recollections?
Well, the earliest I can remember was that Lindsay Hammergoss, I think that's the way you pronounce it, she was the only employee of the Surdna Foundation. And John Andrus III took over as chair. Eddie McGee was still there, and Rush Rutger, and I can't remember the financial guy from Manufacturer's Life, Don Spidell. And you'd meet around the table at noon, or from 9 till noon, and it was done. We go around and listen to the different people submitting their recommendations for funding. We'd all rubber stamp it, and it would be done, and we'd go have lunch at some club, and we'd have a glass of sherry, and we'd be on our way. And that preceded by a day of having met with the children's home, and then half a day at the children's home and half a day at the old folks' home. Well, obviously, that changed a whole lot when it became a regular foundation, there was a lot of work thereafter. But it was kind of interesting, and Eddie McGee, God bless him, he'd come with the worst stories, even worse than John's, and he'd pull out these things that are just terrible. And And between John's bad stories and Eddie's, it was they were really something else. But it was a collegial atmosphere. And then after it became more professional and things went on, the atmosphere changed. But the work improved immensely. And these ladies can go on from there.
Well, I came in 1988, and 2 years after I joined the board with 3 other board members of my generation, we decided to hire a professional and hired Ed Skloot as the first executive director. And this was prompted in part by my father's realizing when he became chair some years earlier that we really wanted to change the quality of the work and the kind of work we were doing. Prior to that, the foundation had focused on 4 particular areas: education, the arts, community, and medicine. And that covers a whole lot of areas, so really you could give to almost anything. And my father read a book that was published by Waldemar Nielsen in 1972. And I did make a note of that because I can't remember all of it, but this really spurred him on to want to make some changes. Nielsen wrote in 1972 a book called The Big Foundations. And chapter 7 was called The Underachievers and Delinquents. The following foundations: the Surdna Foundation, Bush, Pew, and Irvine. And he said that the Surdna Foundation exemplifies arrested development. And that made a big impact on him. And at the end of the chapter, it says that the Surdna Foundation remains inert and its creative potential, if it ever has one, still lies in the future. Well, that was a great impetus for my father to make some changes. That hurt. And thereafter, we did hire a professional and started the development of the different programs. And I must say that watching from that time to where we are today, where it's a very vibrant, healthy, impactful foundation, has been really a wonderful, wonderful trip.
I joined the board in 1991, just as John Andrus was retiring and becoming chairman emeritus, so I didn't have a chance to serve under his leadership. But I remember my first meeting in November of '91, and spending all day up at the homes and then a day and a half or 2 days on Surdna business. And I remember writing a memo afterwards to Peter Benedict, and I think you, because you were chairman and president. I mean, he was chairman and you were president. Afterwards, just saying a first-timer's reaction. And one of the things that I mentioned was, why are we all on all 3 boards? It was a lot of work, and we were spreading ourselves thin. And that conversation picked up more in the ensuing years, but it was one of my first reactions, and it was a privilege to be able to be asked to be on these boards, but it became a monumental amount of work, especially, as Libby says, when Ed Skloot joined and we hired more professional staff and there was more activity for board members to do and so on. It was a lot of work.
Okay, we should restart.
Okay, so
Homeringhouse.
Yeah.
Homeringhouse. No, it's a hard name. It's a hard name to remember.
do you, I mean, this is sort of, I'm just gonna build on what you're talking about and then maybe we'll go back to the questions, but do you remember, are there any decisions that were made in particular that you remember that were sort of maybe difficult and then people really figured it out?
Oh, do we have a few hours? Well, let me just pick up where I left off, and that is that the following spring, 1992, I'm pretty sure it was then, we had a retreat down at the Tanque Verde Ranch, and we started talking about the homes and the relationship to Surdna. And that's a conversation that went on for some time. We decided at the time that we wanted to help the homes become more independent, that we weren't going to fund their deficit budgets anymore. I think that's correct. And but it was difficult because there were a lot of emotional ties to both institutions, and that conversation went on for a while as to how best we could accomplish that and still maintain the relationship with the two institutions in Westchester County. So that was one of the tough decisions.
And the follow-up, building on what you said earlier, that we wouldn't necessarily all be on all the boards. We felt like, first of all, that was a lot of work. And secondly, the conversation began about involving more family members. And this was one way of doing that, that we should have younger family members and more family members involved in on those philanthropy boards.
What year was it that we met in Tampa, that when we first decided to,
It was before my time.
decided to look for environment? Remember Gene Matthews was there?
Jessica
Yeah.
Tuckman Matthews. I think it must have been around
88, 87?
no, it must have
was
been
on-
around 1990.
Yeah, it was just
Okay.
before
Around
I
1990 when we met in Chica Lodge in Florida.
Yeah, that.
And
Was it
That was
Chica?
after I joined the board. I think Tampa was before I came on the board. It was right
Tampa,
after.
Oh,
it was
okay.
down,
So-
we had an environmental and we had an arts.
yeah,
CR.
no, CR, community
CR
and the
and
environment.
environment.
And
We
I was
added-
very impressed by that Janet Matthews. Is that her name?
Jessica Tuckman Matthews.
Okay.
Close.
Okay.
But it really, it tied everybody together because they had more of a common cause at that point, and there was agreement from everybody. That didn't always follow through, but that was one that everybody picked up on.
And it started, the process started. Everybody came with their own ideas
Yep.
and put Post-it notes up all over the wall of, I want to do medicine, I think this is important. And from that, we culled down to the two areas that we started with.
Yeah, yeah.
And then there was the retreat in '92 where we talked about the homes. And then a year later, as the endowment was growing, we convened at the Chica Lodge in Florida.
Yeah.
And each board member was asked to present a potential program area. So we had to do research and interviews in our home communities and so on like that. And we came down there and made presentations, and there was a chief presenter on each topic with maybe one or two other board members chiming in with some more information on the same topic. And from that point on, over the next 2 years, we added the arts program and the effective citizenry program. So the board was becoming more engaged, and we were expanding the reach of the foundation because of increased assets.
And that I found to be one of the most exciting times, that whole process of really spending a lot of time preparing and researching. And so we went to the retreat, and would have been embarrassed not to have done your research. And we're prepared to get up and defend and promote certain areas and listen to others. And out of that, as Edie said, came, the two new ideas, two new areas that we all really could get behind.
Yeah. That was true. It was a team effort in that thing. Some people were disappointed, but most of us, if we were disappointed or not, we went forward with the idea of the whole. And I think that made it even better, because there were some people that wanted one thing and they didn't get it, but they got behind the plow and they just pulled ahead. So it was a good thing.
And I'm curious, how are decisions made? It doesn't have to be consensus, which would be like a nightmare. Is it a democracy? Like, do you vote?
It did have to be a consensus not in that case,
No.
but the way we made decisions on the board was by consensus until we finally said, we're going to spend forever discussing the same issue. We need to vote and move on.
That's right.
That didn't happen very often, did it? I don't remember that it did.
Oh, I'm sure we could come up with some examples, but I agree. We tried consensus, and after a while, you just can't. You have to vote and move on.
Well, one example was when we decided to or when we had the discussion around term limits for board members and bringing in non-family members on the board. And there were very strong feelings on both sides. And we went into that meeting saying, okay, we're going to listen to everybody. We'll spend a significant amount of time talking about the pros and cons. And then in the end, we need to vote. And we did. And not everybody was
And
happy.
it wasn't unanimous, but we all
That's
got
right.
behind it and moved forward
Yeah.
and added
That was-
a new board member in 1999 and then non-family a few years later.
Particularly the area of non-family members, which was sort of threatening to some. I mean, it marked a real change in a family board, and people were, worried about, well, what difference would this make, and would we not be in control anymore? I mean, there were just lots of worries, and I think that, particularly of those two issues, was everyone found that they added to the board. They really pushed us to think in new and different ways. And even those who weren't for it, in the end, thought it was just a fabulous way to go. Don't you think?
Oh, totally.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, we scored
And
home run. I'm sorry, go ahead, Sam.
it just brought, it was additional intellect that put us on a different level. These people were really sharp, and they knew their areas, and there was something that we, in general, were a generalist and not a proficient in that particular subject. And they added a lot, and they made us think better, and it was a very good decision, and I hope it keeps continuing. But I think the worry was that way back when, we had, who was the lady that came from Rockefeller?
Elizabeth McCormick.
Miss McCormick there. She came and said, do not, if the Rockefeller Foundation at that time, and I don't remember what year it was, but there was not a Rockefeller on the foundation board. She said, that's terrible. Don't let that happen. And so far it hasn't happened, and I think we're fine with, I don't know how many, but I think it's going to continue. The fifth generation is in pretty good control now, and I think things are bright for the future.
I think we all agree that we hit 2 home runs with the first 2 non-family directors we added. There was a national search done. We interviewed a lot of people. And with the addition of Nadia Shmavonian and David Grant, as my friends here have said, they just enriched the conversation. They diffused any family stuff that might have been going on. And there was always a move to try to sit next to one of them at a board meeting so you could just kind of get by osmosis how they thought and everything like that. They were phenomenal people. And we initially gave non-family directors 1 4-year term because this was an experiment. And after 3 years, it was like, wait a minute, we can't let these people go in another year. So we changed it to 2 3-year terms. So we had them for 6 years each.
Yep, that was good.
Okay, we should start.
Is that, okay, we're gonna take a quick, good. I'm just trying to see. What's one, okay, I'm just gonna jump to this question. What's one funny story that you remember that people might not know that took place while you were on the board?
Well, I don't know about people not knowing, because it was pretty common that Sam Thorpe, to my left here, would fall asleep in board meetings, and
No.
so they finally started getting cases of Mountain Dew.
Yep.
Mountain Dew. And about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they'd bring out the cans of Mountain Dew, and Sam would start perking up. Was that funny?
Oh, yes, it really is.
And when he retired, we had a big cake, and it was in the shape of a Mountain Dew can. So that was the standing joke around the table.
Just have to have a little humor. But Sandy Culp ended up liking Mountain Dew quite a bit.
I can't think of a specific funny story. I'll probably go home and think of 10. But, we had fun back in the 90s and the 2000s and we were working hard, And we also enjoyed each other a lot. We made a habit of going around the table at a Sunday night dinner and bringing each other up to date on our family stories and issues and whatever, our kids and so on. And so it wasn't funny so much as we really genuinely got to know each other and enjoy each other and respected each other for the different things we brought to the board. And we laughed. We laughed in meetings and we laughed outside of meetings. I will try to remember a specifically funny story.
I think that's great. Are there any sort of decisions while you that you think were particularly good, like to support particular organizations? Or yeah, I mean, there's so much.
You mean in grant making? Or?
Yeah, in grant making, because it just seems
Oh
like.
boy.
Yeah, that's huge. Is there one organization that you, when you were in the time you're on the board, most proud of supporting? Is that?
Well, there's sometimes I used to have this saying that you get very frustrated with one or two members that would talk all the time. And I used to tell Edie and Libby, I'd come back and I'd have wet armpits. I mean, it was, I'd get uptight about several people. So
You can edit anything you want.
It was tense sometimes. And that would carry over.
I can't think of one
No, I can't
particular
either.
grant, but what comes to my mind is sort of the evolution of the grant making from those early days, even before I was on the board, where they were making the grants to education and to medicine, and which were more in the realm of charity rather than philanthropy. But they were good grants, and they were grants that were very appropriate within that time. And so instead of one grant, it's been interesting to me to look at the evolution and the growth, which has been very natural. I mean, you can look back and say, oh, I wish we'd done this at that time, but really everything has evolved in a very logical, natural way to the point today where I think our grant making is just really, as I said earlier, vibrant and wonderful and well thought out and impactful. So no one grant, a lot of them.
I agree. I don't have one particular grant. The thing that I'm proud of in the Surdna grant making through the years has been the fact that probably 95% of the time, the board members have respected the guidelines that we set up for each program area. Nobody was in there going to bat for a pet project. There were a few over the course of a few years. We had a program where you could sponsor grants, but you really did have to abide by the guidelines. And so the grants that we've made through the years really adhere to those guidelines almost all the time. And I think that's wonderful because to be on that board was a real privilege. And I'm glad we didn't get into little turf wars about funding my organization over yours or whatever like that. They've all been pretty top quality grants, I think.
It's interesting. One thing I was impressed with is the different categories that have changed.
Mm-hmm.
And last night was really interesting because it sounds like juxtas feel like two different categories. It's the economics and it's the thriving cultures. So is there something about, and actually when I was doing the video for the lobby, you were undergoing a whole transition in terms of figuring out what you were supporting and sort of really honing down. Can you talk a little bit more about sort of how the categories of funding have changed and how, it's a big question, but.
Well, I think, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think a good example is that we had the arts, and I can't draw or I don't know how to sing a song, but it got to be pretty important. And the one thing that really helped on all our areas is that the board members learned and appreciated some things that you never would have been exposed to. It was a great opportunity to learn. And I relish, and I just can say that I was very honored to be chosen to be on the board, and I acted responsibly, I hope, at the whole time, because there were things that I didn't know and didn't like, only because I didn't like I hadn't been exposed to them that much, and it really changed my life. And I just say, hallelujah. That helped me a lot.
Well, I think about the time you came on, we were working on a different mission statement, and we really hadn't had a mission statement that was front and center of our thinking and the way we made decisions. And under Phil's leadership, we dealt with that, and as a board, really had a wonderful time in thinking about what was important and developing this mission statement. And out of that came programs. We cut two of the programs, but the programs that we had started to, by design, relate to each other a little bit differently. And Juxta is a perfect example of that, where there's an intentional collaboration between program areas. And I think that doesn't always happen. It's not natural that it does, but certainly there's an effort to make that happen more now. So there's a closeness, I think, within the areas that maybe wasn't there before when they were more silos.
That's great. I'm going to backtrack a little bit back with you, Sam. And you said it, being on the board changed you. You said that being on the board changed you and affected you. Can you talk a little bit more?
I'm sorry, I still can't.
Being on the board changed you, or?
Oh, absolutely. At least I know something about art now. These two won't agree with it, but it, instead of Ducks Unlimited and my small world, I expanded my world, and it made me a much better person. And I am very grateful to John Andrus III for asking me to serve, and I served with great relish and pleasure. It opened up my mind a lot.
I think it helped me too, because I was serving on the board of a smaller family foundation. Sam and we were all on this board, the James R. Thorpe Foundation here in Minneapolis, and it enriched my experience there, and I think my experience on the Thorpe Foundation enriched my time at Surdna. But it made me recognize some of the groups in my own community and understand more, especially in the community revitalization arena here in Minneapolis, just a lot more than I ever would have paid attention to were I not involved with the Surdna board. So we were able to bring things back to our home communities, and I think other board members from other areas of the country would agree with that. I mean, we're the Minnesota Mafia here, but there are others from all over the country.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm building on that. One thing that I'm interested in, sort of like why people do what they're doing, and what.
We should stop it because that's going to be a big one. Yeah.
Why it was important to you to be part of it.
I'm Terry Stern.
Oh, I'm ready to start on that one.
Go ahead.
John Andrus. John Andrus took me out for lunch in 1991 and talked to me about Surdna. He said, "We know that you've been involved with the Thorpe Foundation, and would you be interested in serving on the Surdna Foundation board?" And I was absolutely stunned, because Surdna had been this unknown family special treasure trove over here that it was like untouchable. And I was absolutely thrilled. And why did I get involved? Because what an opportunity. I mean, how can you say no to that? It was a thrill. And as the years went on and we started to do different kinds of work, both programmatically and with the family program, which I'll talk about later, it was just a pleasure and a wonderful responsibility. There was no obligation to it at all. It was a privilege.
It's perfect. I mean, it was a very great privilege, and I think we all took it in hand. There was no monetary gain or anything. It was a special feeling that you really wanted to contribute and give something back, and it helped me think about philanthropy on my own part, and it's led me down a couple different paths that I'm very happy that I'm at, and I have a lot more to do, but It was just a great experience, and it was an honor. John Andrus had a way, John Andrus III, had a way of picking people up at a time in their life when maybe things weren't going completely right, and putting them, asking them to serve, and my gosh, you were just thrilled to be asked, and then going on and going ahead and doing your work. And it was a great privilege, and he had an innate, I don't know, he just knew when people were kind of a little bit down, maybe they're going through a problem of some sort, and he had a way of taking it. There wasn't anybody that wore Surdna on their sleeves, but it was a great honor, and I think that it's followed through, and the people that are there now are the same way, I hope.
Do you feel comfortable sharing some of what was going on?
Excuse me?
Were you particularly in a hard place when you were
Yeah,
asked?
yeah.
Would you mind talking?
No, I was going through a divorce, and I wasn't very happy, obviously. So it helped me a lot, and it got me thinking about something other than business, which I was running at that time, and it helped me. So
But you had skills that you brought to the board and your real estate experience and so on that I think were a factor too. I mean, I'm trying to think, where was I when I joined the board in 1991? I was in a good place in my life. And you know, Sam wasn't. But I was in a good place and was honored to be selected. I think by the time we added a new board member, I think John Hawkins was the next one, and that was 6 or 7 years later. We went quite a while before selecting a new board member, and starting with John and then the ensuing board members, I don't know what they did when they were vetting me. I never knew, and I don't want to know.
it was
I don't want to know.
very hard.
But starting with John and then later additions, people were vetted out for the board. You weren't just added because you were an Andrus cousin, not at all, because we recognized that going forward, we needed to tap people that had skills and interest and time and devotion to this, because we were giving all of that ourselves, and we wanted to make sure we helped elect the right people to the board. So it's not for everybody, and there's not room for everybody, obviously. But we are careful. I think the board is more careful now, certainly more than when they chose me to be on the board. So.
And I grew up with a father who went to Surdna meetings quarterly and also was involved in the homes. So I heard about them and heard the stories, and then went on the children's home board first, and was there for some years, went off for a while, then came back, and then was asked to join the Surdna board. And I must say it's been a privilege, and it's been the most exciting learning experience of my life, and continues to be so. I just always felt so lucky, and never has it been an obligation. And I think I missed maybe 2 meetings in 20-some years. Wow. So, that's because I wanted to be there. It's been a wonderful experience.
Yes. I didn't miss many meetings. I missed maybe one. I had to go to a real estate meeting down in someplace warm in February one time.
Yeah, sure.
But other than that, I think I just missed one.
No, we were all pretty committed to being there. I know I took a year off back in the mid-'90s because of family illness, but I was anxious to get back and plunge back in. So attendance was highly valued and expected. And for the most part, we all did that.
And I think that one of the questions or ideas that was raised that we might talk about was the next generation, and Edie can get into that more, but how to begin involving the next generation, and also having them sort of not see it as an obligation, but as a privilege and something they want to do. And I must say, with the younger generation members that we have involved, none of them see it as an obligation, and they are actually thrilled to be a part of the homes, be a part of AFF, to be a part of the Surdna board. They are absolutely delighted. And I think when people's terms are over, they grieve, that because it's been such an important part of their lives, all of our lives.
Yeah.
And do you see, I'd imagine you see family less when you're not serving. I mean, is there something that you get that's not even connected to the grant giving?
Oh.
Yes.
We know our cousins, and we didn't before. So.
Now, there were people that they were on a sheet and we had no idea, and there's still some people that are, we don't know. But one of the things that John helped us with was to try to get a member from each branch. And there were sometimes when there were no really great people in that branch, and then they started coming up out of there, and I think we did a good job. Most of the branches of the family are there represented now. Is that right?
I think
so.
But I mean,
in one way or another, on the
Yeah.
different philanthropy boards.
So
we had the family reunions called Consinities. They initially started out as every 5 years, and then it kind of stretched out to 6 or 7 years. But so you did get to see some of the cousins then. I think the max number or percentage of family members who attended that, one year we got 51% of the family, which when you're talking about a family of 400 people, that's a lot of people. But still, there are some people that we still don't know.
Yeah.
But that's inevitable with a family that large.
And actually that started, that effort to bring family together, with Aunt Helen Benedict, who in 1966 invited all of her nieces and nephews and spouses to go on a cruise, and took them on this cruise, and so brought together family members that really either had never met each other or certainly didn't know each other. And that kind of was the impetus
Yes,
for
it
the
was.
Consinities and for the ongoing
Yeah.
efforts to bring people together in the
Absolutely.
family.
Yeah, that's
That's
right.
when your father and my father got to be such good buddies. Ugh. Naughty boys. No, that's okay.
Do you?
I should probably check the.
Get up and get back and everything. Let's keep going here.
Phil, if they get some more sugar in it, that's
Sugar? Yeah.
Little Mountain Dew?
We didn't get Mountain Dew.
Oh,
my
that's all right. I had a
Isn't
little
that a
bit
shame?
of
We really should have a can of Mountain Dew here.
Didn't think of that.
Oh, that's all right. I had a little bit before I got here.
Oh, you did?
What did we do at your retirement party? We must have had.
We had Mountain Dew all over the place.
Then and Libby and I dressed up as Boy Scout and hunters, didn't we?
Yeah.
Well, no, that was it.
That was your birthday party
Yes.
too, but didn't we do that at your retirement
think
party
so.
too?
Anything to embarrass you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
You were such an easy mark. You really were.
Oh, I'm sorry. You went, okay. The follow-on to that, of course, is that we do Diet Pepsi for Josie.
Yes.
So there's like a,
Oh, is
Yeah.
that
that's the modern version
Oh,
of
she has
Mountain
2
Dew.
cans by 9.9.
By 9,
Yeah,
yeah.
we
I
only
was
buy
going to
that
say
for
she was
her.
drinking them in the morning.
Yeah.
We only buy that for her because otherwise we have Coke products, but we get Diet Pepsi for her. So
Oh.
we do whatever it takes to keep our board members
Right.
Keep them happy, huh?
happy.
I tried to reach her last night. That's hard.
Busy.
You probably filmed some of that just then, didn't you?
Just a little.
Yeah, just a little. I thought so. Yeah, it's okay. We had to have a few little spontaneous moments there. I won't tell my Thanksgiving goose story, no. That's a no.
Thank you, Phil.
Sure.
No. You didn't hear that? No.
You really don't want to hear that.
No, let's talk about the family program. That'd be great.
Okay.
No.
So tell me
Go
about
ahead.
the family program.
Go ahead.
Wow.
That's a big thing.
As Libby mentioned a little while ago, Aunt Helen Benedict started the ball rolling back in 65, 66 by having this cruise and introducing the third generation to each other, a lot of whom didn't know each other. That was followed by a move by Judy Coate, Judy Moon, and my mom, Lib Davenport, to put together the first Consinity, which was a gathering of cousins.
Yeah.
And they opened that was in 1973 at the Tanque Verde Guest Ranch. And all of a sudden, the fourth generation was included, and we were invited to get to know each other. There was another reunion in 1978. By that time, I had married the cousin I met at the 73 reunion. And so there was all kinds of fun stuff going on in our family. But when I joined that laid the groundwork. And at ensuing family reunions, John Andrus would oftentimes get up in front of the group and talk about Surdna, talk about the homes. And then maybe at the next reunion, Peter and Larry sat in on the same conversation, and they talked about each of the homes that they were running. In the 90s and the mid-90s, as the board became more engaged at Surdna, we started to talk about how to engage even more family members. We recognized that we were going to be aging, hard to believe, and that we really didn't have a succession plan in place. And we wanted to find ways to identify family members who would be interested in serving, who would be skilled at serving in a variety of ways, and not just on the Surdna board, importantly on the homes boards too. At the 1998 board retreat at the Ojai Lodge out in California, we talked about program areas, and then we spent a lot of time talking about family outreach. And it was soon after that retreat that the family program kind of got its start. And I was chosen to be the head of the newly created Family Involvement Committee. We hired a consultant here in Minneapolis, Judy Healy. Sam, Peter Benedict, and Larry Griffith joined me on the committee. And over the next year and a half, we had, I think, 26 conference calls. And then we made presentations at the various board meetings to update the board on what we were talking about. There were different ideas from different people outside of the committee, too, as to how to engage family members. We all agreed that we wanted to establish a younger generation fund to be a real training ground in philanthropy, but we wanted to do other things too. We wanted to get people to be on the homes boards. We wanted to find other ways to engage people in Surdna, but there was some discrepancy as to how we could do that. Can you add people to committees without having them on the board, and can you pay their way, and so on. There were lots of issues. But in 1999, we had a meeting in the Surdna office in January, and we invited anybody from the family that wanted to come to hear about our plans. And we had about 30 or 35 people come to that meeting, including people from our generation and the next generation, which was a wonderful turnout. And we presented information on the homes, on the soon to be created officially Andrus Family Fund Board, the Younger Generation Fund. And at that meeting, we were able to identify some people to add to the homes boards right away. So that took off right away. We had also been interviewing at that point someone to be the executive director of the Andrus Family Fund and the overall family outreach program, which we called the Andrus Family Philanthropy Program. And in the hopes that that would develop new ways for members to be involved who were interested. We knew we'd never get everybody interested. And anyhow, so we hired Steve Calban to be the head of AFPP, AFF. We selected 8 young people from the next generation to be the initial members of the Andrus Family Fund Board. And they got to work right away. They had a retreat in March of 1999. And so everything started to roll. And over the next 6 to 12 months, AFF was really getting established, and we gave them $1 million from the Surdna budget to do in grant making for areas that they chose strictly themselves. We had no say in it. We gave them 2 staff people, which was then translated into 3 fairly soon after. Steve Calban, an assistant, and then there was a program officer added later. And over the next 6 to 12 months, there became some new there came to the fore some new ideas for family involvement. We established a family philanthropic newsletter and invited people to submit articles or to write articles for them or to do interviews for them. So that was a new way to engage people. Kelly Calban had the idea, along with the AFFers, to establish a teen philanthropy program, and then a study program called the BETS, the Board Exploration Triads, where they took a family member, an outside family member, an AFF board member, and a professional, and they studied the areas that AFF was funding, a specific area. And they came up, they did studying, and they did reading, and they reported out, and so on. So that was yet another way to engage some other family members. So over the next few years, the Surdna board upped the AFF budget. It now stands at $4 million in grant-making money. It's capped at that because this is a training program after all. And there have been other ways that are not coming to my mind right now, but those were some of the key ways to engage other people. By the time I retired a couple of years ago, we had over 100 people who had engaged in some way, either as board members, as writers, as teenagers, or so on, which was 25% of the family, which was pretty good when you go from 8 board members at Surdna and the homes to all of a sudden 100 people who are involved. And that continues to this day. One of my greatest pleasures was when I left the board, I noticed that there were, of the 10 family members on the Surdna board, 6 were of the next generation. So I thought that was just what we set out to do back in 1999 and 2000, and I'm really, really proud of what we've done. And it's in wonderful hands. There's been a staff change now, and there's been a committee change, and my niece Kelly Nolan is now the chair of the committee, and I think she's doing a great job. I sit back, and she gets in touch with me once in a while and lets me know what's going on, but I'm a hands-off person. I did my shtick, and I'm proud of it, and but it's time for the next generation to move on with things. So I think it was a wonderful project for me because I really consider myself a people person, and I love getting to know the family members more, and I made an effort to do that at some of the consinities. And when we had the most recent consinity, which was some time ago now, 5 or 6, 7 years ago, we had a presentation, and we had somebody from each of the institutions, a family board member, and we had over 100 people at the reunion come to hear the story. Yep. And to me, that we called it Philanthropy 101, and it was very exciting because there is real interest in the family. Again, not by everybody, but by a lot of people, and we've been able to provide ways for them to be involved. So that's my take on the family program. I'm very proud of it.
And Edie deserves.
Sorry, we're gonna.
And Edie deserves great kudos.
Wait,
Oh.
sorry.
Tell me when. And Edie, and I really hate to give you compliments, so this is against my grain, but Edie deserves huge kudos for the leadership that she provided from the inception of the thinking on the family programs to even now. I mean, it was really, she had a great committee.
I sure did.
But it was her leadership that really brought about this wonderful program that has reached so many people. And I know from just my family, I have 2 children who've been involved, that it's made a huge difference in particularly my son's life, in the way he looks at, I mean, he was interested in business and school and his activities, but being on this board has really given him an interest in nonprofits. He's become involved in other nonprofits, and it really has made a significant difference in, I'm sure, not only his life, but many, many others.
Great.
Well, Edie deserves our small committee of Larry, Peter, and myself, we just toddled along and saluted her.
Not true. Not
And
true.
she did 99% of the work, and her enthusiasm, it probably is, maybe, in my opinion, it is the thing that's going to continue to serve the family in years to come. And it was her enthusiasm and her idea of, we could have gone off the deep end and it would have ended. And now I think for generations to come, it'll involve in family involvement. And it's because of her that she really got that going. And so now we've got to know some of the people in the fifth and sixth generations that are coming up, and they have the same feeling that we did, but in a different way. And it's kudos to her and kudos to the family that get involved. So it's been a very good leadership tool, and now under Phil's guidance, and it's growing and continuing, and they're doing good work. So
Thank you for your kudos. I will say honestly that Sam and Peter and Larry were enormously important to me, because there were some bumps along the road and some disagreements among the larger board, and they just pushed me from behind and said, no, this is what we're gonna, this is what we agreed on, and this is the best way for us to go forward. I will tell you that there's one picture that exists somewhere, I don't know where it is, but it's of two of the next generation. Kelly Nolan, who's now on the Surdna board, was one of the original AFF board members, and Caitlin Hawkins, who was also an AFFer, and then the two women, Kelly and Caitlin, served as co-chairs of AFF for 2 years, and they hadn't had a co-chair up to that point. Co-chairs. They just had a chairman. So they took on the job of co-chair, and they brought their daughters to a meeting once, not at the actual meeting. The girls did something with a cousin or something during the day, but they took a picture of the girls at the Surdna board table with the moms saying, next generation Surdna leadership, or something like that.
Yeah.
Little Julia and Haley. So it is wonderful to think that it's going down through the generations. I have a grandchild on the AFF board now. So that's I'm really, really pleased about that.
And I think an added piece to kind of the purpose of the program was not just to involve family members in philanthropy and with the idea that they would go on the Andrus philanthropies, but really just as much that they would go back and be really contributing members of their communities, and which with most of them is what would happen. So it was a training program, but not just a feeder to the different philanthropies. It really was based on the idea that we want to have these family members be contributing members of their own communities and society.
Good point.
Perfect. Yeah, that's it.
Perfect. There was one question here that I thought was, okay, so can next generation family members be treated as equals to long-serving members on the board? But at the same time, is it possible to clearly convey that they're in a learning mode and not all of their ideas should or could be enacted?
I think I haven't been on the board for 2 years now, but I did serve with some of the younger generation for maybe 2 years, 3 years prior to my exit. But I think they're respected. I mean, the AFF is one thing. That is a training ground. The board members that have come on the Surdna board are skilled young people in their own right, and I think there's a lot of respect between the two generations and an enjoyment of each other and some of the ideas that each bring. I mean, there's institutional history from our generation. There's new ideas and new ways to do business from the younger generation. And I think there's a lot of mutual respect between the two. And I don't think anybody's ideas are necessarily dismissed just because they're of the younger generation. I don't know, you can comment more on that.
No, I absolutely agree. There's no way that these younger board members are deferring to any of the older people, and with good reason. They are so bright and so talented, and they really bring a perspective that I think we're learning from them. So no, there's none of that.
No. They're today's world. It would be hard to place ourselves with the talent that's there now. It is extraordinary.
And I think that I commented earlier that there is vetting that goes on. There is intense vetting that goes on among family members, and it's made known to them at the beginning of the process. And AFF does the same thing now. You don't get fast-tracked onto a board because you're a cousin. You need to prove yourself. In AFF's case, I believe they write an essay or something. It's like college applications all over again. But I think both boards, all the boards, are careful about who they're adding. They're not just adding an Andrus cousin for the sake of having another cousin on the board. It's because they bring some strengths to the board and some talent. And there's a lot of it out there. When you've got over 425 family members, there's a lot of talent out there. So to make it available to them has been great, but then they have to, the vetting happens.
And one thing that I'm hearing, can I keep going? Just that's sort of a general question. It seems like, the board members have changed, but the values seem to be pretty consistent throughout the generations. Can you just talk a little bit about what those values are? Because not every family has a family
I wonder if
foundation.
we should say, let's
Don't change.
Well, I think the values is a good word to describe the way Surdna board members have thought about the work. And also, I think having sort of maintaining and focusing on those values for all these many years has really been the reason that the foundation has continued. I mean, many foundations sort of break up according to family branches, and they can't agree, so one branch has this amount of money to spend and really our foundation has never done that. There certainly have been major disagreements about the direction in which we go, but I think the Andrus family values and the emphasis on legacy and Andrus as a family foundation has been there front and center. And I really believe that's why we've existed and thrived as long as we have.
I think there's an intense pride among past board members, current board members, that this family foundation is really a family foundation. I believe we looked into this a few years ago with the National Center, and we were told at the time we are the largest, longest-lasting family foundation in the country, because the Rockefellers and the Fords and so on, they don't have family members on the board, or if so, they just have one or two out of a board of 15 or 20. But we are the largest endowment-wise, and we're 98 years old now, 96, I guess. And I think there's an enormous amount of pride among all of us that we want that to continue, at least through the centennial, and then who knows? When you asked about what do you see Surdna in 200 years, well, I don't know. It might not exist anymore, but you don't know. But there's a lot of pride that we are an effective family board and that we care about what we're doing and that we work closely with our staff and respect them.
We've come a long ways, and you're really right. We try. It's a responsibility and a privilege to be part of it, and we don't try to do a personal deal. I mean, we don't have a pet Boy Scout thing or a Girl Scout thing, and you learn if you sit and read this stuff and are a part of it. You learn what other things happen, and you say, "Gee, that's a good idea," and you respond to that and say, "Well, I'm proud of that." I'm very proud of what they've done, and I continue to be. So I think it's, I don't know if it's going to continue another 400 years or what, but you know, it's a good thing to be part of. And we've done a good job, and it's in good hands now, and I foresee a good future. So I'm very proud to be here and to talk about it, and still the responsibilities to the younger kids. Younger, you know, they're 50, 60 years old. So,
But there's a delicate balance
yeah.
in sort of maintaining the idea of a family foundation when you're there to serve the public good, when you have and embrace a professional staff, but you want to continue this sense of family and the family tradition. And who knows, as you say, what it'll be like in the coming years, because originally it was just family members, now it's spouses and non-family members. So, you know, there may not be the same sense of connection as we go forward. Yeah. Hopefully it will continue maybe in a new way, but it's always a movable kind of thing, don't you think?
Yeah. These two ladies take great pleasure in just harassing me, but because of that, we're friends. Besides family, we're friends. And that really, I think the opportunities to serve on the board and to become friends, and sometimes, you know, there's thousands of miles apart. These two women, you know, they just pick at me all the time, but I treasure their friendship and their intelligence, and it's been it's been an honor to serve. And I hope that in the ensuing years, future family members will become friends, and it'll be a pleasure to serve. So,
I was trying to think about this sort of specialness of Surdna from our perspective, and just even looking at today and the last few years, and I think that the atmosphere in the Surdna office, from what I understand, and I haven't been involved with really other foundations, but is, if not unique, it's unusual. There's a very strong sense of camaraderie, a strong sense of support and caring for among the staff members for each other, and it seems to me to be a very happy place to work, which may be unusual. I don't know. I think that's always been the case, but even more so under Phil's leadership. He's so respectful of all staff members leaving and going on to their next job, staff members today, and so you get the sense that it's really a nice place to work. And the work is hard, they're very busy, but when I go in, I always have a good feeling about the people there and sort of the way they work together.
And when we have been able to go on site visits with staff members here, New York, Chicago, where Boston, I mean, I think we've all been all over the map. Not an awful lot of them, but enough. You really get to interact and you get to see the staff on display, and they're really talented people, and it's really enjoyable to interact with them and to see how they present themselves and how they present the Andrus family to the greater public.
And mention, you know, going on the site visits, going back to the idea of values and humility. The site visits, for the most part that I've been on, I think the staff project that value of humility in the way they interact with grantees. Really, they look at grantees as partners. And my experience is that they're very, very respectful of grantees and really seek to work with them in a collegial partnership way, as opposed to the foundation person coming in and saying, this is the way it'll be.
Mm-hmm. Good.
I guess just to build on what I'm hearing, what sounds really successful is that everybody's sort of assuming best intention, that everyone has a good intention, rather than I know some foundations people could sort of be threatened by each other, but it sounds like you're very much assuming that, okay, maybe we disagree, but let me hear what this person brings to the table. I don't know if that's...
It's true, but that doesn't mean that there haven't been really difficult, hard times with raw feelings, and I mean, it's not been just easy.
Cakewalk the whole
No,
time.
it's not always easy. We've had the wet armpits, you know.
Oh, Sam, forgot about your sweaty armpits. So nice of you to bring them up again. Just pardon me while I move over a little
But
bit.
it does work, and we work together. And there's a meeting of the minds, and we go forward with that. It isn't always perfect, but we do end up with a consensus and go forward. So it does work.
The other thing in thinking about Surdna in relation to other foundations, in relation to collaborating within the field, Surdna's really often been a small player, working with very large foundations. And yet I think in many cases, Surdna's really, by virtue of the kind of work we do, has earned a place at the table. And not just a place at the table, but really provided strong leadership. And there are a lot of examples of that. So even though we're not the largest, I think we really feel like we can be a part of the field and provide leadership.
Yeah, there's respect, because Surdna's involved. They respect that, and we might be involved with 1 or 5%, but people say, well, if they've done their homework and we have, then they respect that, and that turns some of the people forward, because we've done site work and we've done a good job. So it's kind of respectful and meaningful to people that we're doing that. So we've done some of the hard work.
And on the staff side, both Ed and Phil have been, I think we would all agree, extraordinary in attracting really wonderful people. I mean, they're sometimes too wonderful because they don't stay long enough and they go on to other great opportunities, which is, of course, what you want, but sad for us to lose these talented people.
One exception to that rule I have to add is Mark Devenoge, the CFO at Surdna. He has been there. I think he was one of Ed's first hires, and he had been an accountant for the foundation prior to that in his young years. Mark knows more about the Andrus family than we Andruses do. He has a collection of peptinoid bottles. He goes on eBay to collect these things from the old Arlington Chemical Company, which was John Andrus's operating company up in Yonkers. And he can tell you more John Andrus stories about his personal history and so on. And he uses this passion for the family and the family values when he goes out to market Surdna to some of these funds that we want to get into. And he is just wonderful.
And can bring it to meetings that he goes to.
And he brings it to meetings with funds that we might be interested in being a part of. But he also brings it to new board members, and I've encouraged the AFF staff over the years to have Mark come and talk to some of these young people, because they really don't have a clue about John Andrus the first, and even the second or the third. And Mark is just a font of information. He collects all this stuff. But to see his peptinoid bottle collection in his office that he goes on eBay to find. And he's found a few other little treasures in there too, related to John Andrus. But he's been a remarkable asset to the foundation. Remarkable.
Absolutely, yeah.
He's almost truly like a cousin because there's no one more faithful and knowledgeable about the family history than Mark.
No.
We gladly claim him as a cousin.
And he
Yes.
likes being one.
Yeah.
I think he's been adopted into the family and he's very
Yeah,
happy.
absolutely.
Yeah.
He's just an incredible talent, and sometimes he says, "Well, I guess they approved that," but and then he goes forward, and you know he's like the cog that he's a family member himself, and he really is important. So besides being a good guy. We've got to know his family. He recently had one of his daughters here in Minneapolis on an internship
right.
at the vet school, and I think he has 3 daughters and a son. Vincent is the youngest, and he's getting close to graduating from high school.
I know. I remember when he was born.
Me too.
Oh, so the centennial. I don't know how far we are along. Actually, Phil's can fill you in more on that, but certainly it's a thrilling and exciting event for us to anticipate, and hopefully we'll all be together to kind of toast the foundation and
Wow.
Should be fun.
yeah.
We're looking forward to it.
But the
Talk about a
specific
point of
plans
pride.
haven't been made yet.
Talk about pride. Wow. I think we'll all be bursting that night, that week. I hope it's a week-long celebration at a nice resort somewhere, Phil. For the whole family.
Lots of wine.
But that is, I mean, 100 years, that's quite a,
Quite an accomplishment.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Onward.
Onward.
Thank you.
okay.
All
Can
right.
you do just for the edit? Can I do? And this is a little bit faking things, but we don't really
Yeah.
just getting reaction shots of them looking at each other. Just we do have the 3 shot, but maybe just grabbing a couple.
Sure.
So maybe if yeah, so Edie can pretend to say something, and Libby and Sam can sort of listen.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, tell us some more words of wisdom.
What does your big toe tell you today, Sam?
Oh, yeah, and my big toe tells me to leave.
Oh, dear.
We're good. We are good too.
Yes, we
Thank you. Thank you.
Anything else that you want to add that I would not have thought to ask? Last moments, last thoughts?
No,
Any
I
other
think we're,
questions. No, I think we've covered a lot.
Phil?
Nothing jumps out.
This is great.
Yeah,
I think we've done it.
I think we have.
Every time I thought of something you should say, you guys started saying it.
Exactly. I was like,
What was that?
You covered.
Every time you
This is a
thought-
miracle.
you thought of
Yeah, they
something,
covered all
say
the
we started
territory.
This is
saying-
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah, they're the stars, so.
You covered like a lot,
Oh, good.
but totally naturally.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
But you know, I will tell you that it helped to get this in advance.
Yeah.
Oh,
Even a little
absolutely.
bit further in advance would have been helpful.
Yes, we were negotiating up until the last
I
minute.
know.
So it was,
But it gave, at least in the hour and a half this morning that I had to think about it.
we
I,
had this thing where we didn't want you to over prepare, but
Yeah,
we
I
also
know.
thought for some people they like to have it just fresh, but I know that you guys like to see
Well,
it
I really
anyway,
do
so.
think that having more than one person at a
Yeah.
time, because you
Playing
could
off
get
each
a
other.
few people who will,
No, because one of the rapport was really clear, and
Or
the
be
way you could
nervous.
play off of each other was great, and
yeah,
and the fact that Sam felt put upon was
Absolutely.
really useful.
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's very natural.
It will never change.
Oh, I'm so excited. Yeah, I mean, because I've done one-on-one interviews with family members of different organizations, and it is a little harder for them to warm up if it's not
I think so.
a group
yeah,
situation.
no, this worked really
You can
well.
see that what they do to me.
And you love every
So we
minute
feel
of it.
sorry for you. Don't worry, Sam.
But please put your arms down, okay? Oh, yes, thank you. I don't need the sweaty pits. I gotta hit the road, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I gotta be
Me
downtown.
too. I got to get
40
to the
miles.
airport, so yeah.
Okay.
Jesse, nice to be with you again.
Jane, thank you.
Okay,
I
so
hope-
we're good.